Truthspresso, episode 304.
In a world gone bonkers.
It is not, generally speaking, unruly, but fires have been started and...
Where the culture is a dumpster fire.
We're coming for your children.
And churches have lost their way.
I am really uncomfortable with the story of the crucifixion.
It's time to wake up with Truthspresso.
Truthspresso.
Your weekly shot of truth. And now your host, Daniel Minnick.
Hey there, friends, family, foes, and lurkers alike. This is your host, Daniel Minnick, for yet another episode of Truthspresso. And this is going to be another episode where I take some content that I have aired before and present it again, but in this episode I want to take some content where I talked about things that I seem to have been predicting about what we would face later on. And so you probably remember the fateful day in whatever state or country you were in which the news of the novel coronavirus was that it was spreading to a town or a home near you and that policies were coming. Or they abruptly happened such that everything started to shut down and they issued what they called shelter-in-place orders that were colloquially called lockdown orders. And so a lot of people had to stay home under some penalty of law, and that they were only allowed out if they had to do so-called essential activities like go shopping, but not to go attend church. And some people saw through the charade of that. People could go get liquor at bars, but they were not allowed to attend churches. Thousands of people could flock in and out of stores to buy food. But even churches that tried to follow the 6 feet rule or even more than accommodate that were told, no, sorry, you can't meet together because singing or worshiping God, what have you, that type of thing would be more of a super spreader than people going to stores. Thousands of people in and out the door, buying food, touching food, whatever, would not spread as much. But I think in hindsight we could see that there was some push for secularizing society by the fear-mongering of the novel coronavirus. Now, back in mid-March, so when the universal shutdown orders were really starting, basically March 15th and stuff, the evening after I came home from work, when I found out more about things shutting down and that I was not going to be showing up for work the next Monday, and I heard that the Federal Reserve had slashed interest rates by 0.5%, because they were afraid that people staying at home and not spending as much money, they were saving, there was fear of things, there wouldn't be as much leisure activity and so on, that the solution, the political solution was to cut interest rates. I saw a different thing on the horizon. So we're talking about the very first day of lockdowns starting. That what was on my mind. Now, there are lots of people hoarding toilet paper, and I talked about that, but I released on March 16th, 2020, an episode called Embracing Coronanomics. And by that, I didn't mean embrace what the Federal Reserve and what politicians were commanding people do as if it came from God. That's not what I meant. I meant embracing recognize what's going on, realize the detrimental effects of policies while also looking for silver linings wherever they may be. That's what I meant by embracing coronanomics. But in this episode, the very first day of lockdowns, I talked about what I figured the effects were going to be in the long term. And I didn't think it was going to happen immediately. But while everyone was fearing massive recession, and of course there would be a massive recession, while everyone was fearing that a massive recession was going to devastate the economy such that we had to stimulate activity, such as slashing interest rates, making borrowing more tempting, trying to turn on the money spigots, trying to get businesses borrowing more money more cheaply, trying to make people act more irrationally, such that, when you have something like this, the idea is to try to save up more money and pay off your debts. Use a recession as a way to kind of fortify your financial situation. The powers that be that always think the opposite of what intuition and common sense would tell you, all they're thinking of is slow down in economic activity. We have to use some means of getting people to spend money they likely don't have. And so the first thing on my mind was all this stuff is going to cause inflation eventually, because as businesses are producing less, anticipating that people are going to be doing less activity and there'll be less stuff to buy, as people are receding their spending, as the supply of goods and services is reducing, governments are trying to stimulate spending more. And they're going to pump more money because of lower interest rates into the economy. And of course, when that happens, certain people, certain businesses, certain favored institutions in connection with the government get that money first and they spend it first. So they're enriched. It's a redistribution of wealth. And then those of us who are cutting back our spending, trying to rebuild our savings, what we're going to face is things getting more expensive because lower supply of goods and services combined with a greater money supply that we don't get to have, we don't get to participate in, that's going to hurt the poor and middle classes the most. So that was on my mind when everyone else is freaking out about recession. I'm thinking more about when's the inflation going to happen because of this stuff. And so I'd like to play a clip of my March 16th, 2020 episode, Embracing Coronanomics, where I, way back in the spring of 2020, predicted that we were going to see rising prices and inflation. Well, when you're the Federal Reserve, when all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. So think of lowering interest rates in a situation like this. It's like stretching a rubber band back really thin and tight, and thinking that when you let go of it, it will just slowly and smoothly taper down to its original position. No, the more you stretch a rubber band trying to chase after encouraging and stimulating more economic activity, when all the indicators say that economic activity needs to slow down at least for the time being until things correct, is like stretching a rubber band. When you let it go, it snaps quickly the other direction. It doesn't simply slow down and taper down to its original position. And I think the Federal Reserve, and I think people who support the Federal Reserve, who support this kind of central bank, especially those who follow the Keynesian school of thinking of economics, misunderstand how things work. Now, I'm not a professional economist. I'm just a layperson who follows some professional economists of the Austrian School. So I disagree with the Keynesian way of thinking and liken the current activities of keeping interest rates too low for too long like stretching a rubber band. Eventually, it's either going to snap or it's going to be let go, and then we'll see more inflation happen reflected in higher prices faster than we would anticipate given the constant and rapid growth of the money supply. Now, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. Hey, I don't even believe in the continuation of the sign gifts right now. So I don't believe that any Christian has a gift of prophecy from the Holy Spirit, meaning that they get special revelation from God to predict future things. What I'm talking about predicting inflation is not some kind of special revelation. It's more like general revelation. If you understand the fundamentals of how reality works, and I would like to point out that what's known as the Austrian School of Economics, as the Ludwig von Mises Institute teaches, and I had been watching their lectures and stuff for years. And so even in the mid-2000s, when people were talking about buying houses and flipping them and stuff, I was leery about buying a house at that time because I knew that that would be financial suicide because it was going to crash. I knew that was going to happen, and I'm talking about when I was in my mid-20s, I understood this. And so I waited out the crash, and then my wife and I bought our house when the price of houses were basically at rock bottom. And so that was a good time to buy a house. And then also the same type of thing happened. So during all the stimulus and all the reckless spending of 2020 and 2021, I would even talk to my wife and some of my friends about how we were going to have a rapid bubble in real estate that would burst, and it would be even more devastating than the real estate bubble in the 2000s. And sure enough, I was even tempted to think of, I don't mean really, but the thought crossed my mind that if we would think about selling our house, the best time to do that would be November of 2022. But of course, that was just the economic thought, not an actual thought. I wasn't actually thinking of putting my house in the market, but I thought the best bang for the buck would be to sell. If anyone was going to sell a house, it would be in November of 2022. And then sure enough, especially with the increase in interest rates that the Fed was forced to do, because inflation was getting rough at that time, increasing interest rates, naturally that would make borrowing more expensive, which would then make less borrowing happen, which would mean that fewer people would be able to afford buying a house, which would naturally lead to bursting the bubble in the housing market, and then that would have to force, if, the government allowed the market to work, to force a correction in house prices, and then house prices would have to come down to where more people could afford to buy houses. Truthspresso is like caffeine for the mind each week to take on the world's craziness. So why not do that with some actual caffeine, like in an actual cup? That's why Truthspresso is partnering with 7 Weeks Coffee. Unlike all the big woke coffee companies, 7 Weeks Coffee doesn't use their profits to fund abortions or clown world woke causes. 7 Weeks Coffee is a Christian-owned company that has donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to pro-life organizations. In fact, the name 7 Weeks Coffee comes from the fact that a 7-week-old baby in the womb is about the size of a coffee bean. 10% of every sale and upwards of 50% of their profits go towards saving babies. 7 Weeks Coffee has donated to over 850 pro-life organizations. But what about their coffee? Is it good? 7 Weeks Coffee is mold and toxin-free, ultra-low acid, and direct trade sourced from farmers they personally know. Get it ground or whole bean. Try their Hope Blend Medium Roast or their Faith Blend Dark Roast. Sip in serenity and drink with dignity, knowing that you're helping save lives with every purchase. So why not wake up with a podcast and a coffee company that share your values? Check out 7 Weeks Coffee for both delicious and virtuous coffee. If you follow my link at truthhub.org/coffee, for every succulent blend you purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go to Castle Rock Women's Health, a life-affirming clinic that offers comprehensive women's health care and saves babies. Check out 7 Weeks Coffee today and save lives by going to truthhub.org/coffee. That's truthhub.org truthspresso.com/coffee. Now, back to 2020, when we're still under the throes of the pandemic and the lockdowns. I said, even in my Embracing Coronanomics episode on March 16th, that I was starting a series on economics, mostly because I wanted to make sure people understood what was actually going on. As they were fearing the virus, I thought people should fear the powers that be more and the tricks up their sleeve. And so that people should get an understanding more of what policies can cause as unintended consequences. And so in April 20th of 2020, when I was doing a series on economic lessons from the Bible, I did an episode called Inflation, Legalized Counterfeiting Against God. And I showed how the definition of inflation changed over time because the powers that be want to make you think that inflation isn't just an increase in the supply of money that inevitably results in rising prices. They want to split the baby. They want to make sure that you think that they can increase the supply of money, and that can be completely distinct from what causes prices to go up. Now, I did say that there are other factors that could cause prices to go up, such as lowering the supply of something. If something becomes more scarce, the price can go up, but things can also go more scarce and prices go up when the supply of money goes up, and the supply of money goes up when governments borrow and spend money, and they can buy up goods and services at current prices at the time, and then as that money circulates, and those of us on fixed incomes and such, we don't get any of that new money until it circulates, and then the prices of goods and services eventually rise, and then we're the ones who lose out. While those who get the free money from the borrowing and spending at the federal level, they get free money to buy goods and services, and basically they're passing on the bill to us. So, I kind of want you to be angry about that thing so you understand. But in this episode, April 20th, 2020, Inflation, Legalized Counterfeiting Against God, I talked about more how I expected that prices would rise as I was talking about what causes inflation. Now remember, most people at this time are fearing deflation from a recession. But I, because I'm understanding things from a biblical and common sense perspective, am worried about policies causing inflation. So here's a clip from the April 20th episode. Because the mainstream of economic thought in almost the entire world now has been duped by the teachings of John Maynard Keynes to believe that there can be a strong demand for more money that doesn't ultimately result in higher prices. I mean, what do these Keynesian economists think that people do with all that new money if it doesn't result in increasing prices? Do they eat it? Now, as I was doing my series on economics from the Bible, I found a book written by Dr. Sean Ritenour, who was one of the scholars for the Ludwig von Mises Institute that I had followed for quite a few years. And I decided, hey, I should try to reach out to him. I was reading his book, and I reached out to him, asked him if he'd like to do an interview for my podcast, and he actually said yes. And so on May 4th of 2020, when the CARES Act that had $2 trillion worth of spending, at this time, this was like an unprecedented bill. This was by far the largest spending endeavor in United States history in one bill. I was rather frustrated and nervous about this thing. Of course, a lot of people are thinking, this is completely necessary. It's called the CARES Act because they care about us. They're trying to help us survive while this pandemic is raging. But I had Dr. Sean Ritenour on Truthspresso on May 4th to talk about how he became a Christian, his current ministry. He's an elder in the OPC, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, but he's also a professor of economics and has a PhD in it. And so I figured I would get his wisdom.
Hi, I'm Sharon Wilharm, host of All God's Women podcast and internationally syndicated radio show. I'd love to invite you to join me as we bring to life the stories of women in the Bible and discover their relevance for our lives today. Listen at allgodswomen.com, your favorite podcast platform, or at christianpodcastcommunity.org.
And so I'd like to play a clip from my interview with him on that, in which he also predicted that the spending and things like the CARES Act would lead to price inflation. And of course, the current wisdom at the time was just, people are so thirsty for money with all this recession that it's basically the economy is like a sponge and it's just going to absorb all that money because it needs it so badly. But I and Dr. Sean Ritenour at this time were not having it. And so here's my question to Dr. Sean Ritenour on pandemic policy, and here's his response to that. So, Sean, I want to get to the last point of our discussion, which I'm sure we're all rather tired of having to talk about, but you wrote your book, Foundations of Economics, A Christian View, and I know we're probably all tired of talking about this current pandemic and all the politics around it and the economics, really the economic problems that are occurring as a result of it. And so, as a Christian economist with a PhD in economics, what are your thoughts about basically state governments are handling this pandemic? Are there any problems with the economy? Do you think there's overreach? And do you have any thoughts about where you think things might be going and what the road to recovery might look like?
Oh boy, yeah, those are all good questions.
I opened Pandora's box.
It's hard. It's really hard to answer that. That's yes. It's really difficult to give a definitive answer because in many ways this is really unprecedented. I mean, this full, almost full, I'm not complete, but a significant lockdown of the economy has never really been tried before, at least in a market society. But in essence, I mean, it's as if the government has just decided that it's worth it to just restrict the production of all sorts of economic goods. And I think that, I mean, it's very strange because on the one hand, okay, obviously right now you have loads of people thrown out of work, unemployment applications zoomed into the stratosphere, highest level perhaps ever. And so that can't be good. The government just passed a $2 trillion stimulus package. And so $2 trillion is going, with a T, is going to be injected into the economy. And where's that money coming from? Well, it's not going to come all from taxes because the tax revenues aren't going to be that hot. I mean, because most of tax revenue is funded by income tax. When incomes have collapsed because economic activity has collapsed, income tax is going to be really, really thin. So it's going to be borrowed, and that's going to cause interest rates to go up. Well, the government doesn't want that. The Federal Reserve doesn't want that. So the Federal Reserve has already acted to provide, loads and loads of liquidity, bank reserves into the financial system. And again, we're talking trillions of dollars. That money then gets lent directly to the government through the banking system. We're essentially monetizing the debt, monetizing the payments. And so that money is all going to get into the hands of the people at the same time that we're cutting back on production. So in general, there will be lower supplies of goods available. It won't be universal, but in general, lower supplies of goods and increased demand for goods because of because of the new money. And that's a recipe for significant price inflation.
So I hope that you enjoyed these little clips from the past. And once again, I'm not playing this to puff myself up in a, see, I told you so, look at how great and prophetic I am. I'm talking about, here's what the Bible says. Here's what common sense says. But we can easily be led astray by the powers that be and do good policies that don't fit with common sense. But when there's fear-mongering and we're led away from thinking in ways that make sense, we can be hoodwinked by policies that seem like they're supposed to do good, but all they do is impoverish people and they allow people to steal money. And of course, you've probably heard of all the scandals coming up. I mean, there were ones revealed at the end of 2020, 2021, even up until now, of how there was a lot of theft of pandemic relief funds, which should have been easy to see coming. You know, if you have all this rapid response policy spending trillions of dollars, there's going to be lots of institutions lining up to hit the jackpot there. There's not a lot of time to set up the security to think things through. And now you end up with a lot of fraudsters who made out like bandits, literally, because they stole our money from the people for themselves. And now with inflation and rising prices and an administration that claims that it has inflation under control every month, every quarter, and yet the data keeps coming out showing that they don't really, they're the ones who are making out like bandits with all the ridiculous spending on our behalf that enriches them. Well, we have to keep footing the bill. We have to keep working harder. We have to keep dipping into our savings and retirement accounts and such to pay for their extravagance when they don't even earn it. So I would like to leave us with Haggai chapter 1 verses 5 through 7. It says, "Now therefore thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Ye have sown much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways." So I'd like us to just be a little more sober and vigilant about how our overlords promise us that they're doing things for our good. You know, anyone who wants to borrow and spend on our behalf and act like somehow spending billions and trillions of dollars is for our good when they don't earn it, but yet they hold the purse strings, and we see prices keep going up, but they're living extravagantly. They're not doing it for our good. They're doing it for their good. And so I'd like us to think, consider your ways. And let's pray to God that he would have mercy on our nation, and pray to God that he will protect us from the evil one as we try to live our lives to serve God and fight the powers that be, the principalities and powers that only know how to kill, steal, and destroy. But we have the truth of the Word of God on our side. We have the truth of common sense that God gives us. And so, stay tuned for the next episode of Truthspresso, and God bless.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truthspresso. Be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast app. Truthspresso is a member of the Christian podcast community. Check out other great faith-building shows at christianpodcastcommunity.org.